Some rappers become successful, some become legends, but once in a generation, an artist becomes something bigger than music itself. That was Tupac.
If you're not dark inside and you come to this world, it'll turn you dark. You know what I'm saying? And so if you really have sunshine in you, it's not good to play in the dark. It's just going to extinguish your fire.
Even now, almost 3 decades after his death, Tupac still feels strangely alive. His music still spreads across social media every day. Young people who were not even born when he died still wear his shirts, quote his interviews, post his lyrics, and talk about him like somebody they personally knew. Most artists fade with time. Their sound becomes old. Their image becomes trapped inside a specific era. But Tupac somehow escaped time itself. And maybe that is because Tupac never really felt like a celebrity. He felt human. That is the difference. When people describe Tupac, they rarely start with charts or awards. They talk about how he made him feel. People say he felt real. They say he spoke from the heart. They say his music sounded alive. They say his interviews changed the way they looked at the world. That emotional connection is rare. Few rappers create that level of emotional loyalty because most artists are performing a version of themselves. Tupac felt like he was exposing himself completely, even when it hurt him, especially when it hurt him. And maybe that honesty is exactly why people still cannot let him go emotionally. Tupac was born into pressure. His mother, Afeni Shakur, was part of the Black Panther Party. Before Tupac even entered the world, his family already carried the weight of political struggle, government attention, fear, and resistance. Most children are born into normal households. Tupac was born into an atmosphere of revolution. That changes a person before life even begins. Inside his home, conversations were not just about survival financially. They were about injustice, oppression, racism, inequality, and resistance. Tupac grew up watching people fight emotionally against systems larger than themselves. And because of that, he developed emotional awareness very early. That awareness separated him from many rappers later. Before rap, Tupac was deeply connected to poetry and literature. He studied Shakespeare, he studied acting, he attended the Baltimore School for the Arts, he wrote poems constantly. Think about how unusual that combination was. A future gangster rap icon studying theater, ballet, literature, poetry, and dramatic performance. That combination created something different emotionally. It created an artist who understood storytelling, emotion, tension, tragedy, and vulnerability on a deeper level than most rappers. That is why Tupac's music sounded cinematic. His songs did not feel like simple rap tracks. They felt like emotional monologues from somebody fighting internal wars publicly. Even his voice sounded different. Deep, emotional, powerful, urgent. You could recognize Tupac instantly after hearing only a few seconds. And more importantly, you believed him emotionally. That is what people connected to. Believability. Tupac never sounded emotionally disconnected from his own lyrics. When he rapped about pain, you felt pain. When he rapped about anger, you felt anger. When he rapped about love, you felt vulnerability. Most rappers make songs. Tupac made emotional experiences. That is why tracks like Dear Mama still affect people decades later. The emotion inside the song feels too genuine to age. It sounds like somebody speaking directly from their soul instead of trying to create a hit record. And that emotional honesty became his superpower. A lot of artists hide weakness because they think vulnerability makes them look soft. Tupac did the opposite. He exposed the weakness openly. He exposed fear openly. He exposed confusion openly. That made him relatable in a way most rappers never become relatable. People saw themselves inside his music. Not perfection. Humanity. That humanity came directly from pain. Pain shaped Tupac's entire personality. His childhood was unstable. His family moved constantly. There were financial struggles. There was chaos. There was pressure. He watched his mother suffer. He watched addiction affect people around him. He watched poverty damage lives. Those experiences stayed inside him emotionally forever. And instead of hiding those experiences, he transformed them into art. That is why songs like Changes, Keep Your Head Up, and Me Against the World still feel emotionally relevant today. The frustration inside them still sounds real because many of the problems he talked about still exist. Poverty still exists, racism still exists, violence still exists, betrayal still exists. Tupac's music survives because the emotions inside it never disappeared from society. Unlike many rappers, Tupac was never afraid to sound emotionally exhausted. You can hear loneliness in his music sometimes. You can hear fear hiding underneath aggression. You can hear paranoia. You can hear confusion. You can hear somebody trying to survive psychologically while carrying pressure publicly. That emotional transparency made him different.
Most artists create distance between themselves and their audience. Tupac erased the distance. Fans felt like they knew him personally because he allowed them inside his emotional world completely. That is dangerous for a celebrity, but it is also what creates legends. Because emotional honesty creates timelessness, and Tupac was emotionally honest, even when it damaged him publicly. That is another thing that separated him from many artists. He was not obsessed with looking perfect. He cared more about expressing himself honestly than protecting his image carefully. That is why his interviews still spread online constantly today.
When Tupac spoke publicly, it did not feel rehearsed. Sometimes it felt like somebody unloading years of pain directly into the camera. He talked about injustice, racism, poverty, violence, police brutality, politics, and fear openly. And remember, he was only in his 20s. That is the crazy part. When you listen to Tupac speak, he sounds emotionally older than his age, like somebody who already experienced too much life too quickly. And maybe that emotional intensity came from feeling pressure from childhood onward. Because Tupac never seemed emotionally relaxed. Even in happy moments, there was intensity hiding underneath. That intensity made him magnetic. You could not ignore him. Whether people loved him or hated him, they paid attention because he felt emotionally alive all the time.
What's up next for you after this project?
Forward, up, faster, bigger, taller. I got things that's in front of me, but I won't know till I step in it.
Another thing that made Tupac feel different was the contradiction inside him. He was never one-dimensional. One moment he sounded deeply intellectual and thoughtful. The next moment he could sound reckless and explosive. One moment he could write emotional poetry. The next moment he could deliver some of the hardest street records ever created. Most artists stay inside one lane because it is safer commercially. Tupac could never stay inside one identity because there were too many different sides of him fighting internally. That conflict became part of his music. He was a poet and a rebel, a dreamer and a fighter, a sensitive person and an aggressive person simultaneously. That complexity fascinated people emotionally because real human beings are contradictory. Tupac never hid his contradictions. Even his friendships revealed different sides of him emotionally. His connection with Jada Pinkett Smith showed a softer, intellectual side of him that many people never expected from somebody with such an aggressive public image.
People close to Tupac often described him differently than the media described him. They talked about his intelligence, sensitivity, emotional depth, and loyalty. That is important, because the world often reduced Tupac to controversy and violence, but the people around him consistently described somebody far more emotionally complex. And maybe that is why people still debate who Tupac really was. Was he a revolutionary, a poet, a gangster, an actor, a victim of his environment, a genius destroyed by pressure? The truth is probably all of those things at once. That is what made him unforgettable. He felt impossible to fully understand. And people become obsessed with mystery emotionally, especially when the mystery ends tragically.
Tupac also understood music differently than many rappers. He understood emotion commercially without losing authenticity. He once explained that an album needed balance. Songs for the streets, songs for women, songs for radio, songs for emotion, songs for pain, songs for energy. That understanding made him incredibly versatile. He could make Hail Mary and Dear Mama. He could make Hit 'Em Up and Keep Your Head Up. He could make emotional records and aggressive records while still sounding believable on both. Very few rappers can do that successfully, because most artists eventually become trapped inside one emotional tone. Tupac moved between emotions constantly, and audiences followed him because the emotions felt authentic every time. That versatility helped him become bigger than music. Different groups of people connected to different sides of him. Women connected to the emotional vulnerability. Street audiences connected to the aggression and survival mentality. Political listeners connected to the social commentary. Young people connected to the rebellion. He represented multiple things emotionally at once. That is rare.
Most artists only represent one idea. Tupac represented an entire emotional spectrum. And then there was his work ethic. The amount of music Tupac recorded was unbelievable. Studio sessions became non-stop. He recorded constantly as if time was running out. People around him repeatedly described him working obsessively day after day.
After his death, multiple albums continued releasing because of how much material he created. Fans literally believed he might still be alive because there was so much unreleased music appearing after his death. But the reality was simpler and sadder. Tupac worked like somebody who subconsciously knew his life would not be long. There was urgency inside everything he did. That urgency exists in the music too. Nothing about Tupac sounds emotionally lazy. Even weaker songs still contain intensity. He attacked music emotionally, like it mattered deeply to him every single time he stepped into the booth. That passion created timelessness, because listeners can hear when somebody truly means what they are saying. And Tupac almost always sounded emotionally sincere. Then prison changed him. This is one of the biggest turning points in his life emotionally.
Before prison, Tupac still publicly showed more softness and openness emotionally. After prison, something inside him became harder, more aggressive, more paranoid, more emotionally guarded. Even people close to him noticed the transformation. Prison intensified the feeling that the world was against him. And then Death Row Records entered the picture. That environment amplified his aggression even further. Death Row did not feel like a normal record label. It felt dangerous. Intimidation, power, conflict, and chaos surrounded everything connected to it. Tupac entered that environment emotionally wounded already. Hurt, angry, betrayed, exhausted psychologically. And instead of calming him emotionally, the environment pushed him deeper into conflict. You can actually hear the transformation happen in his music.
Earlier Tupac records often sounded emotionally reflective. Later records sounded like somebody emotionally preparing for battle constantly. Then the East Coast versus West Coast conflict exploded publicly. And this conflict felt real during the 1990s. It was not internet drama. It was genuine tension involving labels, artists, entourages, media, ego, and fear. Tupac became the emotional face of the conflict, especially after the Quad Studio shooting in New York. That moment damaged him psychologically. He believed he had been betrayed. Whether every detail was true stopped mattering emotionally because the pain itself became real to him. And once Tupac felt betrayed emotionally, he transformed that pain into aggression publicly. That is where Hit 'Em Up came from. And honestly, Hit 'Em Up does not even sound like entertainment. It sounds like rage, genuine rage. That is why the record still feels shocking today.
Many rappers create diss tracks strategically. Tupac sounded emotionally consumed by the conflict itself. Again, that is what separated him from most artists. For many rappers, music is performance. For Tupac, music became emotional warfare. And once emotions become public at that level, real life becomes dangerous very quickly. The media amplified everything constantly. Every interview, every lyric, every insult, every appearance. Tupac stopped feeling like just a rapper at that point. He became symbolic, a symbol of rebellion, a symbol of pain, a symbol of anger, a symbol of resistance. And symbols carry enormous pressure emotionally. By the final years of his life, Tupac sounded emotionally exhausted sometimes. Even in interviews, he spoke about death constantly. Friends around him noticed changes in his personality. The pressure was clearly affecting him psychologically. Yet he continued working non-stop, recording constantly, planning movies, planning business ventures, planning future projects. It was like part of him still believed he had unlimited potential, while another part already sensed time running out. That emotional contradiction makes his story tragic. Because Tupac died at only 25 years old. 25!
Most people are still figuring out who they are emotionally at that age. Tupac had already become one of the most famous and controversial artists in the world while carrying unimaginable pressure psychologically. And when he died, the story never received closure emotionally. There was no redemption arc, no peaceful final chapter, no older version of Tupac reflecting on life decades later. The story stopped, violently and suddenly. That unfinished feeling became part of the legend. People still ask the same questions constantly. What would Tupac have become if he survived? Would he have left death row? Would he have entered politics? Would he have become a major Hollywood actor? Would he have matured emotionally and escaped the chaos? Nobody knows. And maybe that uncertainty is exactly why the legend continues growing, because unfinished stories haunt people forever emotionally, especially when the person felt larger than life while still feeling deeply human at the same time.
And modern music culture actually makes Tupac feel even more unique now. Today, many artists feel overly controlled by branding, marketing strategies, algorithms, and social media management. Everything feels polished, carefully, safe, calculated, predictable. Tupac felt unpredictable emotionally, sometimes inspiring, sometimes reckless, sometimes brilliant, sometimes self-destructive, but never fake. That authenticity created emotional trust that still exists decades later. Young people discovering Tupac today are not just discovering old rap songs, they are discovering emotional honesty. And emotional honesty never becomes outdated. That is why his music still reaches new generations constantly. The pain still feels real. The anger still feels real. The love still feels real. The frustration still feels real. Nothing about Tupac feels emotionally empty. And maybe that is the real answer to why Tupac felt different from every rapper.
He was not trying to become a perfect celebrity. He was trying to survive emotionally in front of the entire world while carrying the weight of pressure, pain, expectation, fear, fame, and contradiction on his back. People felt that struggle deeply. That is why even now, decades later, Tupac still does not feel like a memory. He feels unfinished. And maybe true legends never really disappear because their emotions continue living inside the people who hear them.
It's too much money here. I mean, nobody should be hitting lotto for 36 million and we got people starving in the streets. That is not idealistic, that's just real. That is just stupid. There's no way Michael Jackson should have, or whoever Jackson, should have $1,000,000 billion and then there's people starving. There's no way. There's no way. That these people should own planes and their people don't have houses, apartments, shacks, drawers, pants. But even if you earned it, you still owe. Because look at me, I don't have that mega money, but I feel guilty walking by somebody. I gotta give them some mail. And if I know I got $3,000 in my pocket, I feel like it's wrong to give that person a quarter or $1. It's wrong. Only you know what you got in your pocket, and that's wrong.